14ers, this is always at the top of everybody's list because there's been a railway for almost 100 years. But there's also a road up the top of Pike's Peak. But you could also make the argument for Mount Evans, which is about 100 feet taller, but you do have to walk like 200 feet up. It's actually closer to 100. We just did it. And about 0.6 miles. Whereas here, it's pretty much flat on the top of Pikes Peak. And once you take the train or the car, then you just walk to the summit, no problem. So if you're not taking the train, it's a very, very strenuous 14er hike of 13 miles one way, 26 miles round trip, and 7,500 elevation gain. If you think of it like the typical 14er hike is going to be 10 miles round trip and about 4,000 feet of elevation gain. So the thought of actually hiking it instead of taking the road or the train is kind of not good, unless you're a glutton for punishment. But the downside of taking the train is you only get like a half hour on the summit. And then you have to catch the train on the way down. But if you drive, you can take all the time you want. Okay, so we're waiting for the Cog Railway for Pikes Peak. So Pikes Peak, there's two options. You can take the road or you can take the train. I think there's also a trail if you really want to take the trail. But the train's about 71 for an adult in July 2023 and maybe 53 for a kid. But the tickets sell out pretty quick. We had a lot of trouble getting tickets on the train. We've been trying for several days. So the Cog Railway is in Manitou Springs, Colorado. This is probably the most touristy town I've ever seen in Colorado. You know, I mean, it reminds me of Florida, not the ski towns or anything. I think it's kind of Pikes Peak probably is the easiest 14er, even if you count Mount Evans. If you want to, we're going to have a video about like one of the easiest that you can actually climb that doesn't have a road to the top, and that's Mount Sherman. There's also those like Mount Democrat and all those that are closed to the public at the moment. So they were open for a long time, but they're pretty easy. You could bag 4 of them in one day, but they're on private property and now you're not allowed to go up them. But Mount Sherman, you are allowed to go up, and it only has about 2,000 feet of elevation gain, and it's a relatively short distance too. But it's not as short as Pikes Peak, where you don't have to do any walking whatsoever, or Mount Evans, where you just have to do a little bit of walking. There were some people that took oxygen on the train. I guess that's not a terrible idea, actually. Nobody got sick on the train when we were there, but there were the people across from me. I was a little bit worried. He was not going to keep his lunch, but he survived it. So yeah, it's a big elevation jump, and they use Pikes Peak in a lot of the medical literature about altitude. Because it's had this train for so long, over 100 years. It's one of over 50 14ers in the state, and there's only 2 that I know of that have a road up to them, to the very top, almost. If you put Mount Evans next to it. It was unfortunate we didn't get to spend more time in the museum, and so that's the real downside, I think, for Pikes Peak taking the Cog Railway. Is you just are in such a rush. I never would have guessed that you wouldn't have an hour at the summit or something, but they don't give you a full hour there. So, that's the other thing. Like the slower they go up, the less time you have at the summit, which is kind of a bummer. Manitou Springs, like I say, is very touristy, and parking in Manitou Springs is obscenely expensive. I recommend using the parking lot for the Cog Railway if you're going to use you're going to park, which seems likely for most people. That that was a more reasonable rates than the city rates in town, which have shuttle buses that go to the Cog Railway. Just use the Cog Railway one, and I don't think that really fills up. Subscribe to Slow Boat Sailing. We give you the secrets to do your outdoor adventure. Check out our video about Mount Elbert, the highest 14er in Colorado and the peak of the Rocky Mountains.